So once again, welcome to the Unshakable Foundation meeting of Cocaine Anonymous. This is a main share meeting, and today it's with great pleasure and lots of gratitude that we welcome Marc W, who's come to share on the topic of what it was like, what happened, and what it is like today, for up to about 40 minutes, after which we'll open up for the Q&A portion of the meeting. And with that, Marc, it's over to you. Thank you so much.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. My name is Mark, and I'm an addict. Glad to be here today. You guys can't see this, but it's a snow blizzard in St. Louis, Missouri today, and I'm sitting in my office and on my hotspot because at the dealership that I work at, our Wi-Fi and our computer systems are down. So on my iPad and with my phone, but I'm grateful to be here. Thanks for asking me to come. And so I'm going to get into this pretty quickly. I told you my name's Mark and I'm an addict. My sober and clean date is September 16th of 2003. I have a home group. It's called Gratitude Hour. We meet every Sunday at 10 a.m. in St. Louis, and the topic is gratitude. We're about 100 plus every Sunday morning at 10 a.m. So if you're ever in St. Louis, look us up, the Gratitude Hour. I have a sponsor, and I sponsor other men in the program. And grateful to be here. And so I told you that my clean and sober date is September 16th of 2003. So I'm going to talk about my very last drinking and then drugging day, September 15th of 2003. And I'm going to talk about some things today that I know to be true, that I had absolutely no idea how I thought, how I felt, what I was going through, problem solve, any of that during the time that I'm talking. But being clean and sober for 21 plus years, I've learned to put a name to many of those things, so I'll be able to do that today. So on September 15th of 2003, I woke up in probably around 5 in the morning. I woke up and my very first thought was this: I can't wait to drink and drug. And my second thought was, how can I do it without anybody else finding out? See, everybody in my life knew that I was a drug addict and an alcoholic. Everybody knew that. And so in order for me to do those things, I had to have a plan in place so that nobody else could find out. And I will tell you that I wasn't a very good planner. And so when I woke up that morning, I did the traditional things that we do every single day. I brushed my teeth, combed my hair, and went off to work. Now, on September 15th of 2003, it was a 70-degree day. It was beautiful. It was a Monday. The skies are blue. I left my home. I drove about 20 minutes away to my office. And I had a sales meeting on that Monday morning at 8 a.m. I got into that sales meeting and my boss was talking. And all I could think about was, how in the world can I get out of here today and go out and drink and use? And I mentioned my boss because I don't know if you guys have coworkers like me. Back in the day, as we say, I was the coworker that was always called into the boss's office for always being in trouble. And so it wasn't too long before that sales meeting that he called me into the office. And as I'm walking to his office, it could have been one of 10 things that I was in trouble for. And on his desk was a piece of paper, and he had a pen on that piece of paper. And he said, sign here. And I immediately signed because that's what I did. I didn't read anything back then. I felt like if I signed it, that would be the quickest way out of that office. He said, this is a no drink, no drug contract. If you drink or drug, you'll be fired on the spot. You're susceptible. You're subject to a breathalyzer or a drug test at any moment. And if you're found that you have been drinking or drugging, you will be fired on the spot. I signed that piece of paper and I walked out. And like many of the delusional thoughts that I've had in my life, I thought, well, I'm not going to ever do this again. So fast forward back to that sales meeting on that Monday, September 15th. As my boss is talking, all I could think about was, how can I get out of there that day on that Monday so that I could go drink and drug? And I thought, okay, here's what I can do. Now, here's the plan. And this is the important part of the story, is the plan in place is this: 2 parts. Number one, once he's done talking, I'm going to go drink and drug. And I'm going to, and I need to be back at 1:00. So that's the first part. I'm going to leave. I'm going to go buy some alcohol and some cocaine. And then I'm going to be back at 1 o'clock. And this is the second part's the most important part. I said, do not get into any trouble. Okay. So number one, I'm going to go drink and drug, be back at 1 o'clock. And number two, do not get into any trouble, because I was on the cusp of a lot of trouble the last few times that I went back out. And so he's done talking. I get into my car. I drive to a convenience store. I call the guy, and I'm driving down to St. Louis in my car. Now, remember, I told you this was a perfect 70-degree day. Skies are blue. The birds are singing. And I don't know, this is what it was like physically for me at the end of my drinking. I had to wear a suit and tie back in those days. And my T-shirt under my suit would be sopping wet. My shirt would be damp. The inside of my car, I had to run the defroster, not only in the front, but in the rear, because my body temperature was so high. And then at the end of my drinking and drugging career, I just couldn't talk. I mean, I just couldn't communicate with anybody. So it wasn't a whole lot of fun to be around there during that time. And so I'm driving around to St. Louis like a madman. And I get to a place centrally in St. Louis. It's at 270, Highway 270 in Manchester Road, a very busy area in the highway. And I looked down at my watch, and it said 10 after 1. And I knew that I was in trouble, because I knew that I needed to be back at the office by 1 o'clock. I knew that if I walked in, if I drove another 20 minutes to the office, that if I walked in, that I would be asked to leave. I'd be fired on the spot. And the one thing that I didn't tell you was that not only would I lose my job and my source of income, but I would lose the only means of transportation I had was my company car. And so I thought for a moment, I'm going to go home on that Monday. I'll make up some story that I'm sick. I'm going to go home on that Monday. But the girl, what I call the girl of the moment, was at home. She was at home because it was her house. See, I was the type of guy that owned nothing. I was an irresponsible, useless human being at that time. And I thought about going home, but I knew that I knew she was going to be home on that Monday afternoon. And I knew that once I got to the doors, she would ask me to leave. See, the last time that I did this, I did what I typically did. I begged and pleaded and gave her the story, what I felt to be true, that I loved her, there's no way that I'll drink or drug again. I promise you. And I made all those promises. And here I am. Where am I at again? I'm drunk. And see, I was the type of guy back then, when I moved with a plastic bag. See, I didn't own anything. It would be a plastic bag would be all my belongings. But that last time that I talked myself into the house, she put everything in a suitcase, and see, it was her suitcase because I didn't have one. And when I left that morning to go to the office, that suitcase was still by the front door, because to her, it wasn't a matter if I was going to drink or drug. It was just a matter of when I was going to drink and drug. And so I knew that I couldn't go home that day. So couldn't go to the office because my boss would fire me and he'd take my company car. And if I went home, I would be asked to leave and I wouldn't have a place to live. And that was about 10 after 1 on that Monday morning on September 15th. About 15 minutes later, I walked into an Allegiant bank and I robbed that bank. And that was the last time that I took a drink or a drug. And I tell you that story that suddenly, because that's how suddenly I thought about it, and how quickly that the robbery took place. And I will tell you that I'm not a bank robber on the run telling this story all over the world who got away with it. I will tell you there are consequences to robbing a bank in St. Louis County. And I was caught later on that night. And I knew then my life was going to be completely different than what it was then. And so that's what happened. That's what happened. My drinking and drugging years at the very end. Now, I don't know, I haven't looked to see who's on here. My sponsor says, he always talks about, Mark, do you want to have a storybook life? And I said, and my sponsor's a guy named Harold. And I said, well, yeah, Harold, I want to have a storybook life. He goes, do two things and you'll always have a storybook life. Number one, always have a new guy. And number two, go to a place that you don't want to end up every week. And I promise you'll have a storybook life. And I don't know if I think some of the guys that I sponsor are going to be on here today. I can't really take the time to look, but every now and then one of them will say to me, Mark, why don't you talk about the other 20 years that you drank and drug? Why do you just talk about that last event? Well, the very first time that I took a drink, the very first time that I snorted a line of cocaine, I did it alcoholically and addictively from the very beginning. I was that guy that would just go balls to the walls from the moment that he drank or drugged. And that's what it was like for me. It wasn't the first time that I had cuffs on my wrists. It wasn't the first time that I was asked to leave a job. It wasn't the first time that a girl said, "You've got to leave." That was the story of my life. And I knew right then and there on September 15, 2003, that my life was going to be completely different. And so this is what happened. I heard this knock, and I looked up, and I was in a one-man cell across the river in Illinois. And I looked up, and it was a state trooper. And that state trooper looked down at me, and he goes, "Are you okay?" And I gave him the stock answer that I gave every single one of you for my entire life. I said, "Yeah, I'm okay," when there was nothing okay about me. And then he looked down and he goes, "You know you're going to prison." And I looked up at him, and I just didn't know what to say. And I can tell you that I didn't know what to say because I couldn't take in exactly what was about to happen to me. And but I will tell you this, being sober for 21 years, I think over the last few years, I've thought about what was I thinking those first couple of days that I was arrested. And I think this is what I come to the conclusion. I was thinking that I was hoping that I would close my eyes and that I would just go to sleep and none of this had taken place, that it was all a nightmare, or I would close my eyes and I would never wake up. You see, I'd done the song and dance in the battle with alcoholism and drug addiction, and I was losing. I was like a prize fighter that led with his chin every single time. I was getting knocked out and beaten to a pulp every single time. And sitting in that jail cell and listening to that state trooper say, "You know you're going to prison." I knew that there was no way that I was ever going to be able to walk into a courtroom, put on a nice suit and tie, get an attorney that I would beg to represent me, and talk my way out of it. I knew what had transpired was something that I was not going to be able to have it go away. There's no more of me saying, "Hey, I promise you I'll never do that again," or "You put me on probation. I promise you this was just a one-time thing." I knew that I was going to prison, and I was concerned that maybe I was going to go to prison the rest of my life. And so after I was in that one-man cell, they took me later on in the afternoon to downtown St. Louis, and then eventually later on that night into a county jail about an hour and a half outside of St. Louis in Troy, Missouri. And when I walked into, they call it a pod. I was one of 16 men in this pod. When they opened the doors and they pointed up to a bunk, it was full of noise and bedlam, and it was crazy. I walked in there, I jumped on that top bunk, I put my head down, hoping that I would fall asleep, and like I said, not wake up. But the reality was I was exactly where I was supposed to be. I didn't sleep at all that night. And approximately 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, they came and they woke me up. They shackled me at my ankles, they shackled me at my wrists, and they took me back downtown St. Louis, and I was put in a holding cell. After a few hours, they took me in front of the judge, and I'm sitting in the courtroom, and certainly full of embarrassment and shame in that federal court. And all of a sudden, this amazing woman comes walking over to me, and she says, "Hi, my name's Jan." And I said, "Hi, Jan." She goes, "I'm your public defender. And I really, truly believe that the judge is going to grant you bond today. And you'll be able to go home." And I looked at Jan, and I probably said the most honest thing that I'd said it to my life up until then. I said, "Jan, if bond's a nickel, nobody's coming." You see, I was that guy that burned all those bridges. There was no more of that employer coming to come and bond me out. There was no more of the girl of the moment coming to bond me out. There was no more of my family. They'd been through the wars of alcoholism and drug addiction. They wanted nothing to do with it. And so I left that courtroom that day. He did not grant me bond. And I went back to that jail in Troy, Missouri. But what was different this time when I pulled up and they took me in and they unshackled me and they opened up to that pod again. I told you when I was there the night before, it was full of noise and bedlam and craziness. I walked in this time and it was completely quiet. And I didn't understand why it was so quiet. And I was a little nervous, and everybody's in an orange jumpsuit. And they walked, finally one of the guys got enough courage. He walked over to me. He goes, "Hey, you're in a whole lot of trouble." My first thought was, we're all in orange jumpsuits. We're all in a whole lot of trouble. He goes, "No, you've been all over the news. You're going to spend a lot of time in prison." And I will tell you, that was not my favorite conversation of the day. But But the reality was I knew that my life was going to be different. And I didn't know how to make it any different where I was at. And so what transpired, and what I'm about to tell you is I didn't know that it was happening at that very moment. But then looking back, it's what started this is that over the next couple of days, I just laid my head on that bunk and I didn't say anything to anybody. And a correctional officer walked into that county jail, and he was handing out mail. I had not called anybody. I had not let anybody know what had happened. Obviously, the local news was letting everybody know. But I all of a sudden, they called my name twice, and I walked up to them, and they handed me 2 letters. And I walked back into my cell, and I opened up those 2 letters. Those 2 letters were from people in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that sent them. One of them is from a gentleman that's been clean and sober for 30 plus years. And another one was from a guy that was a brand new person in the program, but I've never been able to find to this day. And when I read those letters, they essentially said the exact same thing. Mark, we're really sorry about your circumstances, but we're glad that you're at a place that you can no longer hurt yourself. And we just want you to know that we're here for you. We care about you. We love you. I wiped the tears from my eyes. I cried like a baby, the blubber cry, as I say. And I walked back into the day room, and what had transpired with those letters that I didn't know at that moment was I was this hopeless guy that had this much hope in his life. 2 people that I didn't even know wrote those letters to me to tell me that they're here for me and they cared about me. I looked to my right, and there was a big book of Alcoholics Anonymous to the right. It was a soft cover book, and I grabbed that book and I carried that book around for the next 6 months, and I would read every story in that book. So when I was asked to speak at this on Zoom here today, I always say yes. I just got to make it right in the schedule, but I always say yes because I'll tell you why I say yes. Because I know how important speakers were. There were no AA, NA, or CA meetings in that Troy, Missouri jail, Lincoln County Jail. The only thing that I had were those stories in that book. And those stories were about people that were hopeless just like me, that did things exactly like me, that were down and out. Not only did they tell that story, but they also told the way out, what they did in order to get out of there, to have that life that was completely different, that life that my sponsor calls today a storybook life. They told me those things. I read those nonstop. And so I take what happens here very, very seriously. And so I would read those stories every single day, and I would read obviously the first 164 pages, which were the directions on how to get sober. But the reality was that I knew that my life was going to be different, but I just didn't know how much different at that point. And so, but one of the things that you can't do is you can't rob a bank in St. Louis County. I don't know where all of you are from, but you can't rob a bank in St. Louis County and expect no consequences. And so approximately 6 months, almost 7 months to the day that I robbed that bank, I went into court to be sentenced. And one of the stories that I took with me that I truly, truly loved was a story called Grounded in the 4th edition Big Book. And that story was about an airplane pilot who flew an airplane under the very first airplane pilot that flew an airplane under the influence of alcohol. His name is Lyle P. And I will tell you that story just resonated with me. Because when that story hit the airwaves, everybody was talking about it in the world. The late night talk show hosts in the United States were making fun of him about it. And so the reality was, I'm not going to tell you the story. You can read it. He even wrote a book. But the reality was he was going to federal prison. And when he went into the courtroom that day, nobody got hurt on the flight. It was a typical flight, but there was alcohol in their system. And so when they got sentenced, they didn't know how long they were going to get sentenced, but Lyle got sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and the 2 co-pilots 12 months. But the shocking thing at sentencing was that the judge granted bond if they wanted to fight the case on appeal, meaning they could do it from home instead of being in prison. And the 2 co-pilots immediately filed the appeal and left and went home. And Lyle looked at the judge and said, "Your Honor, I'm guilty of the crime that I was charged with. In order for me to walk out that front door, I have to walk in." And he went in that day. So for some odd reason, I connected with Lyle, and kind of like how we do in this thing, one addict, one alcoholic to the other. And I connected with him. And so when I went in that courtroom that day, I just felt the presence of not only people that I didn't know very well that came to support me, but Lyle for some odd reason. And I was sentenced. I eventually spent 8.5 years in federal and state prison for robbing that bank. When I walked out of sentencing that day, I went back into that Troy, Missouri, Lincoln County jail. When I walked in, the other guys there thought I was being released that day. And they said, well, did you get probation or something? And I said, well, no. They said, well, you just, the look on your faces that like you're relieved, like you're going home. Well, no, I knew that I was going to spend a significant amount of time in prison. But the reality was, in looking back, I was already on this journey of my life being different. You know, I don't necessarily know. I can tell you, I didn't know if I was all in and not drinking and driving, but it sure sounded like a pretty good idea from the circumstances that I was in. And so, and the people from the St. Louis area would come to that county jail and they would come and see me. So I'm thinking to myself, these people believe something inside of me could be different. And so, I just went with it. And so but the funny thing about it was that when I got back to that county jail in the United States, they have what's called federal prison camps. And a prison camp is a very minimum security prison. And all the guys at the county jail are saying, Mark, that's what you're going to end up doing. You're going to go into this prison camp. And the only thing I knew about a prison camp was I read an autobiography by the ex-baseball player Pete Rose, who went to federal prison for tax evasion. And Pete Rose talked about going to federal prison and being in a camp, and there were barbecues and there were softball and there was reading and working out. And I thought, well, man, I could do all of that. I kind of like a barbecue. I kind of like softball. I kind of like all that sort of stuff. And so 2.5 weeks later, they come in the middle of the night and they cuff me at my wrists. They shackle me at my ankles, and they take me to an airplane and they put a shotgun to my head with a bunch of other guys, and they fly us from St. Louis to Oklahoma City. I get to Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. They unshackle me. They give me a piece of paper, and on that piece of paper are the initials of where I'm going. And the initials said LVN. And I'm thinking, I must be going to Las Vegas. I mean, that's the only thing I know, Las Vegas, LVN. And the guy behind me goes, you're going to Leavenworth. Now, I don't know about you, but in the English language, the word Leavenworth just does not have a positive connotation to it. There's something really negative about saying Leavenworth. And about a couple of minutes later, I walked into a room, and there was this table, a typical card table. But on that card table was a map of the United States, but it was not a map of the United States that we grew up learning in school. It was a map of all the prisons in the United States. And I could see where Leavenworth, I didn't even know what state Leavenworth was in. I could see that it was just north of Kansas City. So it was only about 4 hours from St. Louis. I thought, well, people can come and see me there. She goes, you're going to the oldest penitentiary in the United States. And I said, well, that's not a prison camp. And she goes, they don't send guys like you to a prison camp. And I uttered some of the dumbest things that I've ever said. I said, I'm only a bank robber. And she didn't find that very funny at all. And she asked me to leave the room. And eventually, a couple of weeks later, I was taken to a maximum security prison in Leavenworth, Kansas. And just quickly talking about the prison stuff, I can tell you that I was scared from the moment I walked in there. My first thought was that was a bad idea going in that bank that day. And so I was one of 3,000 people. There were lots of drugs and alcohol everywhere. And so people would come up to me and they'd say, hey, you want to drink this or do you want to snort this? And I'd say, no, I'm doing the clean and sober thing. And they thought I had 7 heads on my shoulders when I would say that, because they didn't understand why anybody would want to stay clean and sober in a place like that. But see, here was the thing is, there were no alcohol, there were no AA meetings, NA meetings, CME, there was no 12-step meetings at all. And do you guys know what 7 or 8 months with no meetings and no spiritual program, really nothing going on? You know what your head's like? It's just spinning out of control. Now I'm running around the track, I'm doing pull-ups, I'm doing push-ups, I'm doing all those things, but I don't know what to do with this. And this is all I could think about. I don't know how to make things right with you. All I could think about are all the things that I've done to you, and I don't know how to make them right. And they're just spinning in and out of my head. And then one day I walk out on the yard after being there about 3 or 4 months, and there's this guy in the middle of the yard, and he's got his shoes and socks off. And I'm like, doesn't he know that this is a maximum security prison, that you need your shoes and socks on just in case something goes down? And so he turns to the side, and he's got a big tattoo on the side of his head. And he's walking around the yard a little feminine, and I'm thinking to myself, I'm going to stay away from this guy. And I go back into the housing unit, and I heat up some coffee, and I turn around, and there's that guy. He goes, "Hi, my name's Anthony." I said, "Hi, my name's Mark." He goes, "I'm a bank robber from San Francisco." And I said, "Well, I think I'm a bank robber from St. Louis." He goes, "I'm interested in starting an AA meeting. Would you be willing to help?" 20 minutes later, he became my sponsor. You see, Anthony had gotten clean and sober in Lompoc, California, maximum security prison. And he got a good behavior transfer to Leavenworth, which made no sense to go from California to Kansas to me, but that's what he did. And the thing is, 20 minutes later, when I asked him to be my sponsor, he said yes. And we went through the steps just like we go through all the steps. It doesn't matter what circumstances that you have in order to get clean and sober. You can get clean and sober. I just did it behind a 60-foot wall. The guys today that I work with in my living room, my basement, at the West County Club, and in the small meeting rooms. It's the same literature, the same steps, the same everything. If you're willing to go to any lengths to stay clean and sober, you will stay clean and sober. I promise you that. And Anthony would take me through the steps, and we'd read them together just like I do today. But the coolest part about this was I would get to see Anthony in action 24/7 for the most part. He'd get up between 4:30 and 5 o'clock every morning, and he would journal, and he would read, and he would pray, and he would meditate. And when the doors opened up at 6 o'clock, he would go out and he would look for ways to be helpful to other people. I would watch him. And every now and then I would judge him. I'd say, "Why are you helping that guy? Don't you know what he did?" He goes, "Mark, I'm interested in staying clean and sober, and that's what my literature tells me what to do." And that's what he did. And see, we all know Anthony's. There's probably many Anthony's on this screen right now that I'm looking at. See, Anthony's are the guys that will provide service to anybody, that we all know them. See, in prison, you can only go to certain places based on the color of your skin or the gang that you belong to. But Anthony could go anywhere because everybody knew that he had a servant heart. And that's what Anthony did. And he would feed people when he didn't have anything, but he'd feed people that were hungry. He would read to people that couldn't read, and he would write letters to people's families who couldn't write. That's the kind of guy that he was. And he was a great example of what this program is all about. But the greatest lesson that he gave me was that every now and then I would run over to him and I would blurt out what was in my head. And it would be something that I couldn't control or something that I wanted, I thought that I wasn't going to get. And he would just simply say this: "Mark, I don't think we're going to be able to solve that problem today. But what we can do is we can learn how to be of help to other people during a time of chaos." And he would send me off on these cleaning missions, which would drive me crazy. I'd cuss underneath my breath all the way there. But it's the perfect scenario for what we have today. I don't know about you, but when you get in the middle of the boat in this and you have this life that just blows up when you get clean and sober, we get busy. I get busy here at the office, and every now and then my head will just spin a little bit, or I'll have a kid problem, or I'll have a sponsee problem, and it'll spin a little bit. And this is what happens in this self-centered, selfish, egotistical, want to win at all costs mind. It says this: "Please, God, save me from being angry or fearful. And please, God, put somebody in front of me that I can be of help to." Well, what else could I want? I said I was willing to go to any lengths to stay sober. And now this is in my head every time that something kind of crazy going on up there that we call addiction. And so before we left Leavenworth, there were 2 meetings that had been ongoing in that prison. And I've had imagine this, a couple of years after I was out, I got a phone call, and it was on a voicemail, and I played it. And the voicemail said this: Mr. Wright, we just wanted to give you a call. We heard you're doing pretty good. I just want to let you know I'm the warden of Leavenworth U.S. Maximum Security Prison, and we'd like you to come back and talk to the guys. I kept that for a while because I laughed. I said, there's no way I'm ever going back there. And I after obviously telling my sponsor that, he goes, well, it sounds like maybe a pretty good opportunity for you to go help some people. And so I was able to go there twice. The prison has been shut down a couple of years ago, but I went there a couple of times, and what an honor it was to walk back in that prison and go see people. You see, it's an amazing place, and it's a sad place, and it's a violent place, and it's all the things that you can imagine it being. But they had this center hallway that was large, that we walked opposite ways, and in the middle, staff would walk, and I would watch people's eyes as I'd walk by them, and the thing that most of those eyes would tell me is that they were hopeless individuals. You see, I think that's what I looked at. That's what I looked like before I got those 2 letters when I was in that county jail in Troy, Missouri. I think I was hopeless. And when I read those 2 letters and people said, hey, we care about you, we love you, and we're here for you, I think I started to get a little bit of that hope. You see, once you find a God of your understanding, and you believe that you believe in the process of getting clean and sober, and you start to do the work, and your life starts to change, and you start to transform, man, you just don't want to ever give this thing up. And that's what happened to me. And so the good news was that there was going to be a time when I got released, and I had that date. And I'll tell you that I thought I was the most prepared person leaving prison. I had reentry experts talk about I had to have plan A, plan B, plan C, but they taught me all the things that I needed to do before I got out, and what would transpire when I got out. And I talked to people in the program, and so I was all set. So that day they released me, I put on my clothes, and I will tell you that my clothes didn't quite fit right. My body had changed. I was a little bit different. And so I get into the car. The car's a little bit different, the electronics. And then I get on the phone to call my family, and my big nose and my chin would hit the phone, and I'd hang up on him. And so I started to feel a little weird. And so I'd saved some money while I was gone. And I stopped at an ATM machine to get the money out. And as I was trying to get the money out, I couldn't. It wouldn't work. I was trying to follow the directions, and I obviously was doing something wrong. And I thought that I heard the guy behind me go, what, are you stupid or something? And for the first time in the time that I was gone, I started to feel uncomfortable in my skin. And I remember them telling me that and warning me about that. And I started, oh no, am I going to drink again? Am I going to drug again? Oh, is this going to take place? Because I was 0 for 1,000 in calling you. I never called Paula. I never called John. I never called Debbie. Why would I do that? If I do that, you may stop me from what I really want to do. So I thought, am I going to stop? Am I going to start obsessing about this again? And I go home, and I see some family members, and I committed to going to a meeting. I was arrested on a Monday, and I went home on a Monday. And I committed to going to a meeting every single day. And I was going to go to a meeting at 5:30 p.m. I said, can we go a little early? So they drove me to the meeting, and I got out, and the first person shook my hand. The second person gave me a hug. And I've never felt uncomfortable in my skin again. Never. You see, what happened to me was I sit at that table. Not one of you said, hey, you have to leave because I don't like where you came from. I sat next to everybody at that table, and they all knew where I came from. And I explained to them about my disease of alcoholism, and they explained to me about their disease of alcoholism and drug addiction. And my life I felt like I know who you are, and you know who I am. And I got to a meeting every single day. And I got really involved in the program. And so I circled around to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And then on Sunday, I mentioned that my home group is called the Gratitude Hour. And so I walked into that meeting, and I knew what a home group was. It's a meeting that you go to every week, no matter what. And so I got there at 10 a.m. I thought, I can make this meeting every week. There were 7 people there. And I said, hey, I'd like to make this my home group. And they jokingly said, we'll have to have a group conscience and we'll vote on it. And then I raised my hand. I said, I like the service position in my home group. They said, why don't you just show up next week? We'll figure something out. And I showed up every single week, and I've been doing that for, by coincidence, tomorrow will be 13 years that I've been home. And in some ways, I'd celebrate that as much as I celebrate my sobriety and clean day. But so, I told you about, what happened in the parts that, the salacious part about the bank robbery and meeting Anthony. But now I'm at home. What do? And here's what I simply did. I did everything that was recovery oriented. I would sign up for, and I would do it. I would volunteer on committees, on boards. I went to picnics. I went to dances. I went to whatever. I just really, my life became this. But the most important thing is I would take meetings into jails and treatment centers, and I would raise my hand when it came to sponsoring people. And I just showed up. That meeting now, the Gratitude Hour, is over 100 deep every Sunday. We've grown because, I always jokingly say people love to watch a fire, and the Gratitude Hour is on fire. So people want to be a part of it. They want to see it, and they want to taste it. And they want to get in it, and they want to get involved. I hang around people that want to do this thing, that want to help other people. And my life is blown up. And I could tell you a million stories. We don't have enough time to tell you all the things that transpired. But I'm in a place right now that I told you that my day that I've been home is 13 years tomorrow. But I've been in a place where I work right now for 12 years and 6 months. I've worked at the same place. And there's the story behind that. But the greatest story that I can tell you to end this with was, I want you to think about something for just a second. I told you about that girl of the moment. I had a lot of relationships that I was just awful, and I was the world's worst relationship person. At least I thought. And that girl of the moment, that next morning, she woke up and she realized that I wasn't there, and she realized that our relationship was over. And she walked into the kitchen. I know this because her daughter wrote me this later on. And the phone rang, and she picked up the phone that morning, and it was the FBI. And the FBI was calling to say your significant other robbed a bank. And she hung that phone up. She had never been around anybody like that. She didn't even know what to think. So she had to sit down. And so she turns on the TV, hoping that the noise of the TV will drown her head, what was going on in her head. And she turns on the TV, and there's a picture of her significant other, wanted. And now she knew that she couldn't not tell her coworkers were going to know it, not tell her sisters were going to know it, and not tell her 2 beautiful daughters because they were going to know it. Her life was about to change. Now, my sponsor call talks about a thing called spiritual mathematics. Spiritual mathematics is when preparation and opportunity come together and God does the introduction, then the impossible becomes possible. Well, that girl of the moment, I married her about 8 years ago on the beach in Maui. And we have a life today that I couldn't even imagine. There aren't words to describe how wonderful it is. Our life and homes are filled with people in recovery. They're filled with grandchildren and children and people that we love, our neighbors. And we are a large part of the community that we live in because we believe in love and kindness and all that's good in this world. And we learned it in these rooms. And I'm so grateful for that, for the life that I have. And I'm grateful for this opportunity to share this story with you. That's all I got. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Isaac. Hi, everyone. My name's Young. I'm a recovered addict. Mark, where are you? There you are. Thank you so much for coming and speaking and giving us your inspirational story. It was beautiful, especially the ending. And there is no ending. It keeps on going, doesn't it? My question. So I had an Anthony in my life, and I have a lot of Anthonys in my life. I wanted to ask you, when you started to see his walk and his demonstration of what was happening for him, did you start to copy him? I mean, his morning devotion, his morning prayer, his morning meditation. Did you start copying him immediately and doing those practices, or was it a slower burner over time? Thank you. Thank you, Mark.
Thanks. It was everything I said, I've learned from somebody else. There was nothing that I said today that was an original thought. I copied him from the very beginning. I wasn't really into the 4:30 in the morning and praying and meditating and journaling, but I eventually did it. Today, it's my favorite couple of hours in the morning. And today I have two standard poodles named Kobe and Shaq, a 3-year-old and a 2-year-old, that do it with me. And it's just pure joy. But yes. One last thing with it. There was nothing about the program that made sense to me in the very beginning. The steps didn't make any sense to me. I felt like I got 1, 2, and 3 when I was on 6 and 7. I got 4 and 5 when I was on 8 and 9. You follow that, and then they started to make sense. So, yeah, I hope that answered that.
Thanks, Mark, and thank you for your question. Alika, would you like to come in?
Hello, family. My name is Alika, and I'm an alcoholic. I'm a recovered addict as well. Mark, thank you for sharing, man. I'm in Maui. I heard you say you got married in Maui, man. If you ever do come back to Maui, I'll put my number in the chat. It'll be nice to link up. But yeah, man, thank you for your share. Thank you for your service, everybody behind the scenes, and definitely a powerful story, man. You know that Anthony's in our life, and becoming an Anthony, becoming a demonstration. Can you share with us, brother, your spiritual walk in the morning? What does your spiritual practice look like?
Okay, so very simple. So a couple of things with that. I've become conscious of my health as well in the morning. So very first thing from the moment I get up is I walk to this may sound strange. I grab a glass of water. I drink a glass of water. Makes me feel good. I grab a cup of coffee. I walk downstairs into my basement with the 2 puppies. I let them out. I sit down. I still love daily reflections every single day. And then I have a big book devotional that my sponsor, Harold, writes. Read that every single day. Then I sit in quiet time that starts with prayer, then ends up in meditation. Then the other health part of it is I jump into a sauna for about 40 minutes, and then I jump into a cold plunge for about 3 minutes, and then I just feel absolutely amazing. So it's been that way probably for that's been my practice the last 2 years and 3 months. I hope that answered that.
Thanks for your question, Alika. Andrew, would you like to come in with your question?
I did join the meeting a bit later. I do apologise. Mark, what I heard so far was, yeah, it's good recovery. I came in, I've got 3 minutes. So I came into recovery. I came in at 2019 and constantly relapsed. This is my 4th time in. Morning meditation for me is so important. It calms me down. Well, it gets me out of self first thing in the morning. I get up and what do? I go and get a cuppa, have a cigarette, have a vape. And then I read page 86 in our big book on awakening. In there, it's called morning meditation on awakening. And then at night time, I do my nighttime inventory on the same page when we retire at night. From reading the big book, when I came in, I was a down and out street junkie. I was injecting from the toilet system, the toilet bowl, because I couldn't get into the toilet system at the back of our Wetherspoons pubs. And there was no hope for me. This time I came in, I got a sponsor that was armed with the facts about himself. And it took me 3 months to get a spiritual experience. The spiritual experiences took 3 months, and that's took 3 months of knowing what that book has got contained in it. It's took a 3-year book study of self-knowledge availing me nothing to realise everything I need to know is in the book, and no more and no less.
Andrew, do you have a question for Mark?
Okay. What do you? Okay. How do you do your nighttime inventory?
Good question. That's a great one. I actually have the list of questions on my phone, and I send them out to my sponsor every single night. And then I send them to the guys that I sponsor. every single night that are at that point in their recovery. And I will tell you that wasn't part. Anthony didn't get me started on that on the inside. That was something that happened when I was on the outside. And I think it's just as important as that morning routine that I have. And I will tell you, I fall asleep many times before I get it done. And so a lot of times during that morning meditation, I'm typing it in and getting it to him. I'm one of these guys that get older. I could fall asleep just like that when I sit on the couch at night. So, but no, very super valuable.
Thanks, Mark, and thanks, Andrew. Paula, would you like to come in with your question?
Hi, I'm an addict named Paula. Mark, thank you so much for your beautiful share. You've really moved me today. Thank you so much. My question is this. You talked about spiritual mathematics. Could you say it again slowly, please?
Yes. It is when preparation and opportunity meet and God does the introduction. That's when the impossible can become possible. Paula, that was from a gentleman by the name of Tom I from North Carolina, who passed away here a couple of years ago. Tom was a guy that was arrested when he was 18 years old for manslaughter for driving under the influence years and years ago. They let him out of prison about 4 years later. And Tom went on to work for the Department of Corrections in North Carolina, ended up becoming a warden, and then ended up running the entire North Carolina prison system, and was the go-to guy for anybody that wanted to move forward in helping people when they'd come out of prison. And so Tom sponsored my sponsor, Harold, for many, many years before he passed away. And that spiritual mathematics came from him.
Thank you, Paula, for your question. Before I move on to Sammy, I'm aware we've got quite a few hands up and not much time, so I'm going to drop the question time per person to about 45 seconds. If you could just come in really quickly with your question so we can fit everyone in. Thanks. Over to you, Sammy.
Hi, I'm Sammy, very grateful recovered addict. Thank you so much. There's literally, I could ask you a million questions all day long. So I was trying to think what to actually ask you because there's so much I'd like to know. But I was just kind of thinking, like, being a prisoner of our own mind is like the worst kind of prison that we can ever have. But being actually in prison and being freed from the prison of your mind, did you still experience that like true happiness and like acceptance when you were in there? And how long did it take for you to then start sponsoring someone else? And did it sort of attract others in the prison? So,
yeah, that's a great question. No, I found freedom behind a 60-foot wall. I was in prison in my home, wherever I lived before my arrest, because every single day my first thought was, I want to drink and I want to drug. Every single day for 20, and looking back 20 years, I'm at that ironic time in my life where I drank and drug for 20 years. Now I've been sober longer, 21 years. I was in a prison. I was consumed by that 24/7. How can I do it without anybody else finding out? And then it's to this day. I'll look up in the sky. I look at my dogs. I look at my wife. I just sit in my car, listen to music. And it's just this incredible, great feeling. It's like your team just won the Super Bowl. I mean, it's in a sense, it's like that. You just have this, and I can go have a cheeseburger wherever I want to have a cheeseburger. And yeah. I hope that answered that.
Thanks, Sammy, for your question. Danny, would you like to come in?
Hello, everybody. Thank you for the meeting. Mark, thank you for your share. I'm pretty similar to you. I spent a lot of time in prison. I spent like 13 years in prison. And thanks to finding the steps in these meetings, I've learned so much about myself. But one thing, I feel like I always want to speak, but I'm really struggling to speak. Like now, my heart is absolutely pounding on my chest. and I can speak better on the Zooms, but when I'm in big groups, I can't speak, and I feel like I've always got a lot to say. Like, did you struggle with that, and like, what did you do to combat it? I know you need to just speak up, but the anxiety's crippling me, man. I feel like,
Well, that can be a challenge. You know, I still get nervous every time I do this, and sometimes when I get nervous, I can't remember things, and so it's just like anything else. The more we do it, the easier it becomes. And you know, my sponsor said to practice things, be prepared when you come into it. Just don't try to do anything off the cuff. Be prepared. And it's like when you know something inside and out. I know the story inside and out. It takes away some of the anxiety. But you have an amazing story to tell. If you've been in prison, you have a story to tell. When you recover from something like that, it helps a lot of people. And so I would encourage you to do that, practice it, and tell that story.
Thanks for your question, Danny. Charlotte, would you like to come in?
Hi, I'm Charlotte. I'm an addict. Thanks, Mark. I really enjoyed that share. What I found most interesting is when you said that when you got out of prison, the first meeting that you went to, you never again felt uncomfortable in your own skin. And I found that interesting because I've been in recovery for a few years, but you know, like I've experienced a few times the spiritual relapse is the only way I can explain it. So I was just wondering, you know, because I actually thought that my recovery was going to be like that. You know, when I got clean, I thought I'm going to have a really good life and I'm always going to, you know, feel comfortable and fit in. And I haven't really experienced that always. So what would your best advice be to someone like myself?
Okay. Well, there are moments. I mean, I you know, wake up and I'm not tall enough and I'm not smart enough. I'm not, you know, that's why I jokingly always say I drank and drugged, because the moment I took that drink, I was a 150-pound, pimple-faced, red-haired kid in college. And when I drank, I looked like James Bond. And the brown duster that I had in the parking lot was an Aston Martin. And so what happens to me in recovery, there are ups and downs, but we have steps that take care of those things. If you're current with a sponsor and you're honest with that one human being, those things don't last very long. They're moments in our lives. I have been through some, you know, I've had this incredible life, but we had a grandson at 5 years old diagnosed with leukemia. We had our 35-year-old daughter, my daughter, diagnosed with breast cancer last year. We walked all of those things. We were uncomfortable a lot of the times, but we trust in the process. We trust in God. My responsibility, and this is my responsibility in this gig, is to not drink and drug. Not to drink and drug at a 24-hour time. If I do that, I truly believe that God's going to take care of me. Now, what that means is that I'm going to be able to take whatever comes my way, but I still don't drink and drug. And I've had this incredible life living this way.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you both. Seb, would you like to come in with your question?
Hello, I'm going to be really quick. That was really inspirational, Mark. Thank you. I'm meeting bail on Monday and finding out if I'm being charged for another violent offence, which will result in a large prison sentence. It's not looking likely, but my question is to you: if that does happen, how did you navigate being in prison and living by the principles that we're learning in AA? Because it's such a negative and violent place to be. How did you stick to this stuff while you were in that environment?
Yeah. Well, that was the thing that I thought too. But there are a lot of people that are inside those walls that are looking for the same thing that I was looking for. Anthony was looking for that. And then when we started those 2 AA meetings, it was standing room only in those meetings, because there were people that wanted some hope in their life. They wanted a connection. They connected initially with all of us. And then what happens? They start to read the literature, and then they start to connecting to something that's even more powerful than that. And that's there for you too. Whatever goes your way, you just ask for the courage and the guidance to do what's right no matter what. And And there's a big payoff to that. That's all I got.
Great question. Thank you, Seb. We're very almost out of time. Michael, do you want to come in really quickly?
Yeah, Michael, addict. Thank you very much for your share. So yeah, I will make it really quick. I was just wondering, like when it talks about in the book, we turn our worst experiences into our greatest assets as such. Maybe not words to that effect. When you look back at where you were going to lose your wife and you were going to lose your car, and then, robbing the bank seemed like a good idea. And then you talked about your gratitude meeting. Do you ever look back on that situation, like with gratitude? Because it like put you in a position where all these things around like fellowship, spirituality and recovery happened to you through, like with your experience in jail and so on and so forth.
Every single day, Michael, every single day. And it just gets amplified when I get to tell the story. But yeah, every single day.